Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Sakey here. Today I'd like to talk about hate speech. Hate speech is very much on the agenda globally. In New Zealand, it's very evident. We hear of it every day. Hate speech seems to be used as a smokescreen so that the government doesn't deal with the real problems that are going on. They won't tell us how many migrants are actually coming into New Zealand. We do not know, and even if they told us, we wouldn't believe them. So, we have lots of problems going on in New Zealand, and all this government talks about is hate speech and taking away life. Snuff out life on request. They're talking about assisted suicide, legalised abortion, nothing to do with well-being, our well-being. What are they doing for our well-being? They seem to be just taking away life. I mean, the suicide rates in this country are through the roof, and they continue to be so, the highest ever. We've got children in our school with young vulnerable minds being taught about how the seas are going to rise. Can you imagine what must be going on in their little heads that, the seas are going to rise, they're going to swallow us all up, my poor mum and dad, my sister, my brother, my pets will be gone. This is nightmarish stuff for kids. And then the education department talks about, it's teaching about transgender. Oh my God. As time goes on, these young people who have been taught this, when their hormonal changes take place, they're going to be frustrated, angry, and very upset. It's going to leave them confused. So on both accounts as to the scam of the climate change being taught in schools and transgender, that can only increase mental health problems, therefore physical problems, medical problems, and increase suicide rates. So we really have a problem here. So now we're also talking about the rollout of 5G, and we're hearing all sorts of nasty things about that. Poland has banned 5G. I wouldn't be surprised other countries do. It has not been tested. We are the guinea pigs. So let's get back to hate speech. Hate speech restrictions is a means of not addressing specific issues. It's about intimidation and incitement. Politicians who push for laws that they character assassinate innocent people, and Arderns Political Police calling on innocent people. I couldn't get over it. One 12-year-old girl was busy in the yard with her fork picking up her horse poo. The police come onto the property with arms, point a gun at her, tell her to put her fork down and to walk slowly towards them. She is still upset about that. And if that was me, I would be too. The father, who is a collector of firearms, he had 11 taken away. But he does good for the community, he works in the community, he raises money for the community. He is not a criminal, and this is what's happening to innocent people. They're losing their jobs, they're losing welfare. These politicians need to take a look in the mirror at themselves to see the true ugliness that they are presenting to the innocent people of New Zealand. I have attended 2 speeches by David Seymour. I found him to be disrespectful and rude. He advocates for freedom of speech, but doesn't practice it himself. He doesn't let other people practice it when asking him a question. David Seymour just pokes his head briefly above the parapet of the cesspit of Wellington, then ducks for cover. That is David Seymour. David Seymour was the only politician who put his hand up to present my signature with 6,521 Facebook signatures to my petition in Parliament. Other politicians didn't want to know about it. Anyhow, I can only gather that David Seymour must have got in quite a big load of shit over that. He wouldn't have been a very popular person, so now when he sees me, he ducks for cover. The topic of David Seymour's public speech earlier this year was about changes in tomorrow's schools. It was held out at Epsom. I sat there with my hand up for an hour, and he would not even give me the time of day. He was about to close the meeting. So a couple of women behind me pushed forward and said, "This lady here, she's got her hand up. She had it up for a long time." So I was handed the mic, and I asked him, when is the Education Department going to stop mentally abusing married children by telling them they're victims, are not good enough, not intelligent enough, giving them a victim mentality? I said, if you tell someone that they're a victim for long enough, they will think they're a victim, and they will act like a victim, and they will have problems. It needs to stop. Stop mentally abusing Mary. So he just called the meeting to an end. When I asked him when this was going to stop, he just closed the meeting. I said, "Are you going to answer me?" No reply. So the other night, I went to another meeting of David Seymour's at Auckland University, freedom of speech. Right up my alley. A few of my friends were there, hubby was there, so plenty of support. Again, his eyes intentionally skirted round me. He wasn't going to actually give me the time of day. So I moved forward to a seat closer to where he was and put my hand up again, and he just ignored me. Anyhow, the meeting was about to come to an end. But I'd already had 2 questions for him, and I knew he wouldn't take 2 questions, so I gave one of the questions to a friend to ask of him, and that was freedom of speech. My friend who acted on behalf of me posed the question, "David, our democratic rights for freedom of speech are endangered by the proposed hate crime laws. These may include intolerance to xenophobia and Islamophobia under Objective 17 in the UN Global Compact of Migration. Question: do you oppose or promote entering Islamophobia and Xenophobia into New Zealand crime laws?" Response from David Seymour: "Why would I do that when I advocate the freedom of speech?" he said in a few words, but did not answer the question posed. I wondered if David Seymour had any knowledge of the full definition of Islamophobia and Xenophobia. You know how politicians like to cherry-pick words and sentences? Included in the definition of xenophobia is the rising fear of globalisation. We're all fearful of that. Fears of strangers from other countries and cultures. Don't we teach our kids stranger danger? We should be fearful. After all, these are just phobias, aren't they? Islamophobia. Included in the definition of Islamophobia are the dislike of Muslims as a military force, fearing the geopolitical force of Islamic terrorism. Therefore, it's a crime to freely express, talk about the genocide of Christians, non-Muslims by Muslims, even though these murders are at genocidal levels as reported by the BBC. We're not allowed to talk about them. We've all got to go into genocidal denial. It's not happening. You don't see it. It's not happening. When do the media ever talk about it in New Zealand? Come on. I stood up and I put my hand up and I was ignored. So I went and sat closer to David Seymour so he couldn't ignore me. So he did ignore me. So I stood up. He was about to call the meeting to an end once again. So my question to him was, I said to him, I need to ask you a question, David. He said, Carol. He obviously knew me. He mentioned my name. Wow. So he said, one question. He said, at the last meeting, I had to take the mic away from you. You spoke for too long. I thought that's a good start, because that was a lie. All politicians tell lies. So I asked David, if he had known, which he did, he had known for 2 years prior to the UN Global Compact of Migration that this was going to happen. It had been decided in September 2016 at the finalising of the New York Declaration of Migrants and Refugees that the UN agenda was already proposed. All politicians in New Zealand knew this, and they kept their mouth shut. They said nothing. The mainstream media said nothing. They denied us the right, our democratic rights, to speak up and to ask for a public referendum in a timely fashion. They gave us no knowledge as to what the UN Global Compact was about. They just stayed silent and tight-lipped, and it wasn't the politicians who told us about it. It was a little birdie that tweeted it in November last year, and the compact was signed on December the 19th. Well, agreed to. It wasn't actually signed. It was agreed to. The commitments were agreed to by New Zealand. So my question was to David was, why did you stay silent so that people were not able to action their democratic rights of freedom of speech, of freedom of expression in a timely fashion, so that they could oppose the compact and seek referendum in a timely fashion? He said to me, the Illuminati. That was his response. I came back at him and I said, this is freedom of speech, David. I demand an answer. Why did you stay quiet, not say anything for 2 years? He closed the meeting. If you believe that David Seymour is advocating for freedom of speech, he is advocating for more votes, not freedom of speech. So that was my